Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on spelling power. We'll be exploring the fascinating world of prefixes, specifically those that turn words into their complete opposites. Our focus will be on the prefixes il, in, im, and Over the next few slides, we'll discover how these small prefixes can have a big impact on meaning. Let's get started and have some fun mastering these powerful language tools. Today, I want to talk about 4 common prefixes that can really change the meaning of a word. These are il, in, im, and What's interesting about these prefixes is that they all have a similar function when added to a base word. They actually reverse the original meaning, turning it into the opposite. For example, take the word legal, which means allowed by law. When we add the prefix il, it becomes illegal, which means not allowed by law. So just by adding this small prefix, the entire meaning of the word flips. This is a powerful concept because understanding how these prefixes work helps us better grasp the nuances of language. It also ties into our overall theme of how small changes in words can lead to big differences in meaning. Now let's talk about the L rule. This rule helps us understand when to use the prefix il with certain words. The key point here is that we use il specifically when the base word begins with the letter L, for example. Take the word legal. When we add il, it becomes illegal, meaning not allowed by law. Similarly, logical becomes illogical, which means not making sense. Another example is legible, which means easy to read. When we add il, it turns into illegible, meaning not easy to read. So remember, if the word starts with L and you need to add il, this is the rule you follow. This helps keep our spelling correct and consistent, especially when we're working with words that have opposite meanings, like legal and illegal or logical and illogical. It's a simple but important rule that connects directly to the overall theme of understanding prefixes and how they modify words. Now let's look at the M and P rule, which helps us decide when to use im at the beginning of a word. The key point here is to use im when the base word starts with the letter M or P, for example. With P, we have words like possible, which means not impossible or not able to happen, or polite, meaning respectful, and impolite, meaning not respectful. Another P word is proper, meaning appropriate, and improper, meaning not appropriate. Similarly, with M words, we have mobile, which means able to move, and immobile, meaning not moving. Then there's mature, meaning fully grown, and immature, meaning not fully grown. The main idea is that when the base word begins with M or P, we add im to form the opposite or a negative meaning. This rule helps us understand and remember when to use im more easily. It ties into the overall theme of mastering prefixes to improve our language skills. All right, let's talk about the R rule today. This is a really useful guideline for knowing when to use at the beginning of a word. The key point here is that we use when the base word starts with the letter R. For example, take the word responsible. Since the root is responsible, we add to make it irresponsible. Similarly, with regular, when we add it becomes irregular. It's important to remember that if the base word doesn't start with R, then we wouldn't use For instance, the word rational becomes irrational when we add But if the root doesn't start with R, then isn't the right choice. Now, this rule helps us understand the difference in meaning quite clearly. Responsible versus irresponsible, regular versus irregular, rational versus irrational. And the same goes for words like replaceable and irreplaceable, where the presence of R at the start guides the addition of So, in summary, whenever you see a word beginning with R, and you need to add the prefix to indicate its opposite or a related concept, remember to use It's a straightforward rule that ties directly into the overall theme of understanding prefixes and how they modify word meanings effectively. Now let's talk about the default rule when using the in prefix. This rule is pretty straightforward. You want to use in for most other base words that don't start with the letters L, M, P, or R when you're unsure. Remember that in is your go-to prefix. It's a reliable choice in many cases. For example, you can say accurate or inaccurate, where inaccurate means not correct, or visible versus invisible, meaning not able to see. You might also think of complete and incomplete, where incomplete means not finished. Similarly, adequate refers to having enough of something, while inadequate means not enough. The key takeaway here is that in is a versatile prefix that helps you express the opposite or the absence of a quality in a very clear way. Keep this rule in mind as it ties into the overall theme of understanding how to use prefixes correctly to improve your communication. All right, now let's have some fun with an interactive quiz called Match the Opposite. What I want you to do is draw a line from each base word to its correct opposite. So, for example, if you see polite, you'll match it with impolite. Remember, the goal here is to connect words with their opposites, which helps us understand how prefixes change the meanings. Keep in mind the rules for the prefixes. Ill usually goes with words that start with L, like legal, making it illegal. Im is for M and P words like possible, turning it into impossible. Is for R words like responsible, which becomes irresponsible. Na is generally used for other words like accurate, which turns into inaccurate. This exercise is not just about matching words. It's about grasping these common prefixes and how they flip the meaning of a word to its opposite. So take your time, think about the rules, and see if you can master these opposites. All right, now it's time for a fun interactive quiz. On this slide, we have Match the Opposite, part 2 of our activity. The goal here is to draw a line connecting each base word to its correct opposite. You'll notice the base words are replaceable, logical, mobile, visible, and formal. And scrambled, we have the opposites: illogical, invisible, immobile, irreplaceable, and informal. The key point here is to understand that each word has a clear opposite that often describes the absence or the negation of the original. For example, replaceable is opposite to irreplaceable, emphasizing whether something can or cannot be replaced. Similarly, logical pairs with illogical, which helps us see the difference between rational thinking and its opposite. Mobile matches with immobile, highlighting movement versus stillness. Visible is opposite to invisible, relating to whether we can see something or not. And finally, formal is paired with informal, contrasting different styles or levels of formality. This activity isn't just about matching words, it's about reinforcing your understanding of these concepts and how they relate to each other. It ties into the overall theme of communication and clarity. Knowing the right words and their opposites helps us express ideas more precisely. So take your time, think about each pair, and have fun with the activity. All right, let's take a look at this challenge round. The goal here is to choose the correct prefix, either ill or to complete each sentence. First, remember that the prefixes ill and are often linked to words starting with L and R respectively. The tip here is a helpful rule. Words starting with L typically use ill, and words starting with R usually take Now let's go through the sentences one by one. In the first sentence, it's about something that is not allowed legally. Since legal starts with L, we use ill to form illegal. So, the complete sentence reads, "It is illegal to download movies without paying for them." Next, we have a sentence about the toddler's behavior being responsible. Since responsible starts with R, the correct prefix is making it irresponsible. The sentence becomes, "The toddler's behavior was irresponsible when he broke the vase." Moving on, the doctor mentions the heartbeat. If it's not regular, then we say it was irregular. So, we add to regular, forming irregular. The doctor said the heartbeat was irregular. The fourth sentence talks about handwriting that is hard to read. Since legible starts with L, we use ill to form illegible. So, it reads, "His handwriting was so messy it was almost illegible." Finally, the last sentence involves fears that are not based on reason. Rational begins with R, so we use to form irrational. The sentence is, "The argument was based on irrational fears, not facts." So remember, words starting with L get ill, and those starting with R get This rule helps us quickly decide the correct prefix and improves our understanding of these words. All right, on this slide, we're focusing on a fun challenge round to practice choosing between in and im prefixes. The idea is to complete each sentence with the correct prefix, so let's go through them one by one. First, we have winning the lottery is highly probable. The key word here is probable, which is a positive, likely outcome. Since we're talking about something that is unlikely, the correct prefix is im to form improbable. Next, the small amount of food was adequate for the large group. The word adequate means sufficient or enough. Since it's a positive context, we use ad, but here, because of the prefix rules, in is used to form inadequate, meaning not enough. So we're indicating that the food was not sufficient. Moving on, the statue remained completely mobile during the earthquake. The word mobile indicates that it could move. Since it was capable of movement, no prefix is needed here, but if we wanted to say it was unable to move, we'd use immobile. Then the magician made the coin visible. The key word is visible, which means able to be seen. If it were not visible, we would use invisible. So here, no prefix is necessary unless we wanted to say the coin was hidden, which would be invisible. Finally, it is polite to talk during a movie. The key word is polite. The sentence is about proper behavior, so no prefix is needed here directly, but if we were to describe someone who is not polite, we'd say impolite. And a quick tip to remember: use im before m or p words like impossible or imperfect, and use in for all other words, such as inadequate or invisible. So the core idea here is to practice recognizing the correct prefix based on the meaning and the initial letter of the root word. It's a great way to sharpen your understanding of how these prefixes change the meaning of words. Now, let's look at how we can use our new words in real context. I'll walk you through a few examples. First, we have the base word perfect, which means having no flaws. When we add the prefix im, it becomes imperfect, meaning something that isn't flawless. For example, I might say, even the most expensive diamond is often imperfect under a microscope. This helps us see how the word changes when we add a prefix and how it's used in a sentence. Next, we have offensive, which means causing offense or upset. When we add in at the beginning, it becomes inoffensive, meaning not causing any offense. For example, the new paint color was inoffensive and blended well with the room. This shows how prefixes can modify the meaning from negative to neutral or positive. Finally, we look at replaceable, meaning something that can be replaced. When we add at the start, it turns into irreplaceable, which means it can't be replaced, something very valuable or unique. For instance, the antique locket was irreplaceable because it belonged to my grandmother. The key point here is that prefixes can significantly change the meaning of a word, helping us express more precise ideas. By practicing these, we can make our vocabulary richer and more accurate in different contexts. Let's quickly review the 4 prefixes of not that we've covered. First, we have ill, which means not and is used before words starting with L, as in illegal. Next is im, also meaning not, used before words starting with M or P, like impossible. Then there's meaning not as well, used before words beginning with R, such as irresponsible. Finally, we have in, which means not in all other cases, like invisible. Remember, these prefixes help us understand the negation of words and follow specific rules based on the initial letter of the root word. Now for our final challenge, what do you think is the opposite of patient? That's right, impatient, which follows the im prefix rule because it starts with P. Keep practicing these prefixes, and you'll become a spelling expert in no time.